Colin Ellis, welcome to Talking Kindness. How are you?
I'm really good, Graham. Thanks for having me on.
So we've just been talking about your love of Everton Football Club before we pressed record. It's good to know that you've got lots of other things that are going well in your life when things
Yeah,
aren't going so well on the pitch.
they are not being kind to me, nor have they been since the mid '80s.
They haven't been kind since the mid-80s, that's funny. And we are also, I guess, in music terms, we're label mates, right? So you've just had a book come out with Bloomsbury,
Hmm.
Detox Your Culture. So I just thought maybe that would be a good place to start. It'd be good to know a bit more about that book and your take on what makes a good work culture, and also just for people who don't know you, maybe just give our audience here just a bit of background of who you are and what you do.
So I suppose the most important thing the audience need to know and reference to the work is I was an employee myself for 30 years, Graham. Never a consultant. Family didn't get me a job. None of that stuff happens in the
Yeah.
northwest of England. You have to start your way up from the bottom. People tell you you won't amount to anything, and then for the first 5 years of your life, you prove them right. So, for me, it was always about work. It was always about progression. And I got passed over for a C-suite job when I felt that I was in a position to really add value to any organization, really. And I got passed over for a job because they weren't looking for a culture person. That was the word I was using, the word culture back in 2013. Not what they needed. And yet at the time, that was exactly what they needed. There was little in the way of empathy. There was little in the way of compassion, but also there was little in the way of discipline as well. So I decided back in 2013, Graham, largely I was working in projects at the time. And so the concept of projects is you stand them up, you build a great team, you deliver the project, you shut it down, you stand it up, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I had a really good approach. I did have a really good approach to that because projects were pretty successful, largely because of the teams that we built. And so I had this blueprint. And then, yeah, so since 2013, I've been helping teams and organizations to do that. Although the way that I just made that sound, it sounded like, oh, yeah, he was really successful straight away. Like it was rubbish. It was rubbish for about 3 years. Where even now, it's still a struggle to get people to invest in culture
Mm,
because there's still this assumption that it just happens, that everybody knows how to do it, that if you hire the right people, then you'll automatically get the right culture. And Graham, you'll have seen it in your work, and I'll have seen it too, is that's just not the case. So the books that I write, and Detox Your Culture is the latest one, my emphasis is to give people the knowledge so they can actually create, really great cultures and avoid becoming a media story or facing the reputational damage that
yeah.
we see so often these days.
What do you think? Obviously, you've worked with so many organizations and around the world as well. Like, what makes a great working culture, do you think?
Well, one where they actually invest in actually building people together to create the relationships between individuals. And they actually invest time, money, and effort to train managers. I know this sounds ridiculous, but to train managers on how to actually do it. Middle managers really are the difference in every organization. And they just don't have the skills. Organizations waste billions every year on these kind of fancy leadership programs that teach people things like radical candor and all this kind of stuff, which is fine. But managers just need the basic skills of how do I create a great team? How do I have difficult conversations? How do I build and maintain empathy? How do I show compassion in the face of adversity? These kinds of things, Graham, they're really difficult to do, and managers are
Yeah.
crying out for those skills. And certainly with the organizations that I work with, they're the programs that we create that pay back almost immediately.
Yeah, I remember one of my first proper job really was I worked at the University of Birmingham and quite quickly became a middle manager. Our boss put us all through this middle management program. Changed my life. Absolutely changed
Mm.
my life. Just in the sense of, like you say, just realizing that there's a sort of set of skills that you can learn. And it was like, finance for non-finance managers and negotiation and like all of those kind of really core, mostly people-based, but also management-based skills. Once I learned that, it was like, oh, well, I just suddenly think on a different level. And, it's so important, isn't it, to invest in that management capability?
Well, that's right, because you then know, Graham, that it's on you to actually put all of those things into practice.
Yeah.
Red Bull are one of my biggest clients. They've got a fabulous culture, but they invest so much in the general managers and the middle managers. I spent 3 days with them in Austria last year, And a good 2 days of those are spent on actually teaching people how to manage. Now, these people are at
Mm,
the top of the country organization, but the nature of management is, it's a contemporary skill set. It changes every year. So
yeah.
if you don't refresh it every year, then managers lack in the skills required to get the best out of every generation or to have the kind of conversations they need to build vibrant cultures of success.
Love it. Let's talk about kindness then. So, when you think about kindness, is there a particular role model that springs to mind? Is there someone that you think about when I first mentioned the word kindness to you?
Well, for me, Graham, it started at a really young age. My dad was one of 8 kids in the Liverpool area, working class. And as families, they had absolutely nothing. And yet, whenever we went to go and visit aunties, uncles, they would ask you questions. They would show an interest. They would listen. They had no money, but they all tea, biscuits. They would roll out the red carpet. And so when I think of kindness, I think back to those really, really early days because I feel like a lot of that shaped me.
Yeah.
It made me want
Yeah.
to be a good human. Although I have a really great recent example as well. So when I was at Heathrow recently, I was in the queue behind an actor called Andy Serkis. I'm not sure. Do you know Andy Serkis? He's pretty famous. He played the character Gollum in Lord of the
Oh,
Rings.
wow.
That's what
Okay.
but he's a fabulous, fabulous actor. So he's super famous. And of course, everybody wants to talk to him. So we had 3 people round him when he was checking in. I was behind him in the security queue. Someone was talking to him there. Then the people at security wanted to talk to him. He was the nicest fella.
Oh,
To the point where it made me quite emotional. Like, I think there's this consistent narrative that movie stars are kind of self-obsessed, demanding, precious. Not Andy Serkis.
mm.
There was no status about him. He was humble, understanding, gracious. He was kind. He gave up his time to answer questions and talk to people. And for me, it's people who actually take the time to engage with humans. They don't demonstrate privilege. They don't cause division. Or they're not looking to demean or diminish others. They're just looking to interact with people for good.
I also think it says a lot about somebody that, if I'm at the airport and I'm about to check in, I've got to find my passport. Like those moments are quite stressful moments, aren't they? And the idea that you've got 3 people around you trying to get selfies and autographs and you're still kind then, it's like, yeah,
Well, there was a guy when
speaks
we were
volumes.
putting our bags on the security conveyor belt. That's probably an official term for that. He put his bag on, and then the person behind reached over to shake his hand, and they said, "Oh, it's really great to meet you." And he put his bag in the tray, and he looked him in the eye, and he said, "It's really great to meet you too." And he didn't. He just did not need to do that, but he did it. I'm getting emotional just thinking. He was just an awesome guy, and that for me was a really great example of kindness.
Mm,
Didn't give them the attention and the time, but he 100% did. So be more Andy Serkis. There you go.
that's
There's your
lovely.
tagline.
I love that. When you think about kindness at work, is there anything you've experienced there that you really think about? Have you got any good kindness at work stories?
For me, I had a really great boss when I was my first managerial job. I had a really great boss, and the kindest thing he ever did to me was tell me that I was an idiot. Now, that on the face of it, for people listening, was like, what? That doesn't sound kind at all. But I think we forget sometimes that constructive feedback in the moment
Mm,
can be really, really kind. So he took the time I was having a particular frustration and I'd called somebody else a group of idiots, and he took the time to listen. And then he said, listen, having heard what you've said, my assessment is you're the idiot. There was an element of humor in the way that he said it. And then he laid out in very clear terms the way I should go about something. And then he kept checking in. He was also a guy, we had a very difficult person on the team, Graham, and he approached that with empathy, with compassion, but also he was pretty direct about what was required, and I always felt that, and he's still a role model. 25 years on, he's still a role model of mine. Is that what does this person need from me at this moment in time? And sometimes that's an arm around the shoulder, sometimes it's glowing feedback, but sometimes it's a reminder of the job that we need to do, and it's done in a way that generates motivation. It doesn't sap it, if that makes sense.
for sure. Yeah. I talk about this in the book. One of my definitions of kindness is truth and grace. and having those two things aligned. I think often we think about we confuse being kind with being nice. And nice for me, often it's, let's not rock the boat. Let's kind of almost shirk the truth. But sometimes the kindest thing is to tell someone that sucked,
Yeah.
or, there's a better way of doing this and you need to find it, or whatever that thing is. Like personally, if I think there's things that I need to step up around, or things that I want to get better at, like I need that data. Like give me the data so that I can actually act on it and do something different. And that's often not nice, but it's always kind, I think, when you hear that stuff.
Yeah, and particularly when I talk to managers, Graham, is nobody wants to have those conversations, but I always use the word kind. It's kind to
Yeah,
do so.
yeah,
Otherwise, what, you're going to wait till the end of the year, then do their performance review, and then they find out? I was like, the kindest thing to do is to say it in the moment, but do it in a way that the other person appreciates and they can actually act on. Kind of not take home and overthink because your delivery wasn't great.
yeah. What's your assessment around the words kind and kindness when you're doing work with organizations on culture? Are most people attuned and tuned into that language and they want to be kind, or do most people have this thing of, kindness doesn't have a place at work, and we shouldn't be thinking about kindness at work? What's your kind of assessment and sort of litmus test of the words kind and kindness at work?
I think they're becoming more acceptable, and I mean that in the sense that they're just not words that were ever used. They should have been, Graham,
Mm,
100% kind. They should have been. I talk about the fact that emotional intelligence was downplayed for years, soft skills, when these are the hardest thing to do, fluffy stuff. And yet all of the research points to the fact that if someone's kind and empathetic towards us, then, we would walk a million miles for that individual.
yeah,
And so I think there's been a generational shift. I'm Generation X. I think I hope mine is the last generation where I hear people, talking about culture as if it's soft and fluffy, when the reality is it's the difference between success and failure. And at the heart of that is good human beings working in a safe environment to be the best that they can to do the job that they're paid to do. Nobody wants to go to work, Graham, to be the worst version of themselves. And when
mm,
we show someone kindness, what that does is it gives them a pathway to be able to deliver in line with expectations, not only from a performance perspective, but also from a behavioral expected perspective. So I think that, when we look at millennials and Gen Z, we're bringing those children up in different ways. And that's why we're seeing these cultural shifts, and long may it continue.
yeah. And I do think those generations are more like they're more biased towards kindness. I think there's definitely a more open conversation happening there. So when you think about the people that you work with, are there particular examples of ways to be kind? Like what's your favorite way to be kind at work?
For me, Graham, kindness lives in the small moments. Very rarely do I see any great grand gestures, except when people want to draw attention to themselves by telling you they've done these great
Right. Yeah.
grand
Yeah. Yeah.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, my favorite is when I actually, at the minute as well, is because we're so attention poor, is when I see someone actually put down a phone and engage with somebody. I think the art of listening is something that we're losing. So I like it when people actually engage, look people in the eye, remove all distractions, and actually listen. I'm big on random acts of kindness as well. Always have been. I bought someone breakfast a few weeks back, and they still don't know it was me. Just those little things that you can do in the moment, and of course they make you feel good about yourself, but you know that they've made someone else feel good for
Yeah.
that moment.
Yeah.
This particular person was having a bit of a nightmare with the kids, so I just thought that would be a thing to do. So I think, for me, it's in the small moments. It's shouting somebody a coffee. It's asking them if they're okay. Who doesn't want to be asked if they're okay? It's asking them questions about their life, showing an interest, and actually remembering some of the things that they've previously told you, so that there's a continuum of a relationship there. For
Yeah.
me,
For sure.
they're small things, but they really matter.
100%. The small things are the big things, and also that thing about listening. I think listen. I totally agree with you. Listening is in many ways a sort of lost art with phones and fragmented attention and everything else. But it's also when you think about how much of our day is spent listening, it's like such a, it's such an improvement opportunity. Like if we can get 10% better at listening, like how much does that affect our whole day, and so many of those interactions that we have. I just think it's, yeah, huge, huge thing, isn't it?
And I think as well, Graham, what I see a lot of is people listening to respond rather than listening to understand.
Yeah.
And I think listening to understand is the kind thing to do, and actually it informs the actions that you need to take with that individual rather than listening to respond, where it's just you lacking empathy, telling them what you think they need in that moment.
Mm, yeah. One of the people I interviewed for the book was a psychologist, and one of her things was you have to get if to be good at listening, you have to be really comfortable with silence because you need to leave a pause at the end of where they've finished speaking, so you can listen to your own monologue, that's going on in your head before you start responding. And so to be a good listener, you've got to get really comfortable with those small silences in between the back and forth rather than just jumping in and wanting to be filling all of the space. And that's really difficult. Like I've been practicing that since that conversation, and it's really tough to do.
Well, I often find, Graham, that when people are listening to someone else, it's almost like scrolling on their phone. So you're talking, I'm going, yep, 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 yeah. It doesn't need that. Listening is just being present in the moment, absorbing everything that you're saying without the need to say anything. And you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Being comfortable with silence is very difficult for most people.
Yeah, for sure. So you've talked a bit about why you think kindness is a really important thing in culture. Why do you think kindness is something that gives businesses the edge?
Well, it's a fact, Graham, which will be music to your ears, of course, but it's a fact, is when employees display generosity, empathy, and kindness, it improves business results.
Yeah.
Kind of acts of kindness produce oxytocin, the love hormone. It increases our self-esteem, our optimism, our sense of, something's possible, which gives rise to a growth mindset. And when you've got a team of however many people and 80% of whom have got a growth mindset, then literally anything is possible. It creates the foundation for a supportive work environment. And I think what you then see is this increase in engagement, not only with the work, but also with your teammates. We feel valued, we feel empowered, there's trust, and I always say that empathy is the glue that keeps teams together and keeps them performing. And so these are all facts. And so every time you mentioned before about using the word in the office, every time I hear people speak derogatively about, oh God, we don't need more kindness, it's like, well, we really do if you want to achieve your results. There's then a curiosity of, oh, well, what's the link between being kind? Because as you pointed out, I think people mistake kindness for just being nice. And listen, being emotionally intelligent is good, but actually, driving for success is helping each other along the way, and that's where
Yeah.
kindness comes in.
Yeah, for sure. And lots more in the book, which is designed to address that. I was really conscious that there's going to be a lot of people reading this book who are maybe a bit cynical. They've probably been bought the book by someone who really believes the message of kindness, and they're sort of giving, come on, read this. Like we need to do this in our culture. And so I really wanted to address some of that science of kindness in the book for them. So yeah, there's loads of really good studies around all the stuff you're just talking about there. Actually, just empathy and how that really drives, a more people-driven businesses, profitable businesses at the same time. There's
Yeah, and I
really good
always
studies
say,
around that.
Graham, if you look at a book title and you think, oh, I don't need to read this, yeah, that's the book you want to pick up. I have the
That's the
same.
one
It's
you
like,
want to
oh,
read. Yeah.
detox your culture. We don't have a toxic culture. This is the book you need to read. I'm kind already. Yeah, I think you should read the book.
Absolutely. So the new book is Detox Your Culture.
Mm.
But I'd love you to just, as we wrap up, just share anything else in terms of how people can get in touch with you, what else you're up to, anything else that you want to share before we finish.
They can find me on LinkedIn. They can find me on the website, colindellis.com. They can find me on Amazon. I've written 7 books in 8 years, so I'm sure there's something there for everybody. And if they want to find out what kind of culture they have, where they have a culture of kindness, Graham, they can take a quiz. I worked with the University of Georgia this year to produce a science-based quiz to let people know what kind of culture they have, and that's 5culturesquiz.com, 5culturesquiz.com, yeah.
Cool, love it. We'll put all that in the show notes. And
Thank
Colin,
you.
good luck with the book, and good luck to Everton for the rest of the year.
Thanks, Graham. You too for Villa. Yeah.
Speak soon. Bye.